Tonya, you might do your intro for longer. And we can set up the poll.
We are now live.
All right, good morning. I just had to check my watch to make sure it was still morning. Good morning, everyone. Hello. And I am so glad to see you and glad you're able to join in on this session on equity planning. I do believe our panelists are still joining the session, but we are going to go ahead and get started. I'm Tonya Sanders. I'm an associate professor of city and regional planning at Morgan State University, and I will serve as the moderator for this session on equity planning. We do have a superb lineup of speakers for you today. They will discuss how equity planning is being implemented here in Baltimore. So first, I want to kind of start off by answering the question, what is equity planning? Well, equity planning is planning efforts that pay particular attention to the needs of the poor and vulnerable populations. So populations also likely to suffer the burdens of racial and sexual discrimination, both institutional and personal. So a little history of equity planning. Norman Krumholtz, who many consider the father of equity planning, or certainly its most ardent supporter, and particularly of progressive planning, was the planning director in Cleveland between 1969 and 1979. So you imagine he's coming to his post soon after urban renewal. And as we know, urban renewal had a devastating impact on cities across the US, displacing many minority communities in major US cities across the board. And he also drew on his experience, his later experience as the director of the Cleveland Center for Neighborhood Development at Cleveland State University. So imagine in the 1970s and 1980s, there was an increase of African Americans moving into cities and the continual decrease of white Americans moving out of the city and into the suburbs. The Blacks who replaced the whites in the cities overall typically had a lower income. So the disparity, the economic disparity, or that economic disparity gap between the city and the suburbs really started to widen. In Cleveland in particular, this was a time where jobs were disappearing and many were moving into suburban locations. So Krumholtz actually argued that the role of planners really should be focusing on and serving the needs of their city's poor and working class residents by, one, blocking wasteful proposals. So proposals that did not improve the livelihood or the living conditions of the poor and working class. Krumholtz was not a fan of public-private partnerships, particularly those that skewed towards the private and not enough return on investment for the public, such as building stadiums and other large ticket items that didn't have a direct positive impact on the poor and working class. And so they were not really a good investment. He wanted to encourage more productive investments. So we're talking about improving infrastructure, public transportation, attracting living wage jobs, and also helping neighborhoods, investing in neighborhoods. As we see in Baltimore, our neighborhoods vary widely. And some of that is because of investments in higher income neighborhoods over lower income neighborhoods. So Krumholtz was keenly sensitive to the inequalities in cities and also in the practice of urban planning. And he used his time as the planning director of Cleveland to build the city's equity mindset in practice and in policy. Krumholtz's work has influenced generations of not just urban planners, but also students in public administration, civil rights advocates, activists, and others. Unfortunately, Krumholtz died last year at the age of 92. Tom Angati, who's the editor of Progressive City, wrote that Krumholtz's passing is a reminder that it's our job, those of us inside and outside of government, to push towards greater racial and economic equity. There is no higher imperative for cities of today. If we look at what's going on right now in cities, Black Lives Matter movement. So that, again, this pushing back against police brutality. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Anthony Gardner, and many others who should not have died at the hands of police. We also have the coronavirus pandemic that is disproportionately impacting minority communities. And that's for a variety of reasons. Some because it's exacerbating poor health conditions that were already in minority communities, but also minorities tend to be frontline workers. And so they had more exposure to the virus as compared to some of us who, like me, I was a professor, I was able to work from home, and other kind of white collar jobs, people who were able to work from home and not necessarily be exposed. And then you also have immigrants who might have feared deportation if they saw testing or if they even saw treatment at a hospital for coronavirus. I mean, and we can go on. I mean, we can talk about the criminal justice system and how harsher sentencing for Blacks than whites who commit similar crimes. So cities need to operate from an equity agenda and an equity mindset. And like Cleveland, they need to develop their own equity agendas. Our distinguished panel assembled today will talk about how we make Baltimore City a more equitable place. We have with us today Stephanie Smith with the Baltimore City Department of Planning, Dr. Doris Terrell with Broadway East, and Regina Hammond with Johnston Square. I will turn it over to them if they are ready to talk about how equity planning is being addressed and ways in which each of us can take action to better achieve equitable communities here in Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sanders. I'm so glad that I was able to join everyone today. Had a couple of tech glitches, but I'm here with you and I'm happy to be. I think it was wonderful, Professor Sanders, for you to kind of lay the land with some of the work that's happened up until this point nationally about equity and what it means in the planning context. So I want to give a little bit of insight about what's been happening with the Baltimore City Department of Planning and our approach to equity, and then I want to really turn it over to our community leaders that are making it happen for real. And I look forward to hearing from them and sharing some of their work. So my job title is Assistant Director for Equity, Communications, and Engagement for the Department of Planning. So my focus is on how do we better connect with the community serve. And one of the reasons why my job even came to be was because frontline staff at the Department of Planning realize that people who go into this profession, they go into it because they love cities. And oftentimes a planner will end up working in a city that they do not hail from. So there's sometimes a general understanding of inequity, but it's always important to get the local grounding of what inequity has meant in practice for the city that you're working in. So the Department of Planning realized that across the staff, there was a deep desire pre-2015 uprising to get a better understanding of equity as a general concept, and then to distill kind of what are the features of it in Baltimore City and how does that impact our jobs and our ability to best serve the residents of Baltimore City. So we convened an equity committee, and that was something, again, staff driven. It was not a top-down approach. And over a period of a few years, the staff committee met. They decided that there was a need for some more robust training of themselves as well as their colleagues across the city, and they came up with an equity action plan as a result. And that equity action plan was focused on how can we not only improve the hiring and recruitment pipeline in terms of racial diversity for our agency, but also how can we better connect and serve particularly those communities that have been historically underserved and underinvested in, that have been the victims of redlining, that have been the victims of really not being prioritized like any other resident or any other community. And we felt that this inequity was planned, but we had a responsibility to unplan it, and knew that there are many federal and local and state laws that are no longer legally permissible because they definitely discriminate in an outright way that people can identify. But sometimes it doesn't really matter that you make certain rules unconstitutional or you take them off the books if the ecosystem still has the muscle memory of what they were intending to uphold. You still have a private sector pattern of behavior, as well as certain decisions even inside happening on autopilot that are not centering our communities of highest need. So we realized that there were a couple of things that we needed to focus on that we had a little more control over. One is the capital of the city. Per the city charter, the Department of Planning prepares the capital budget for the city that is later approved by Planning Commission and then finally approved by the Mayor and City Council. Because we are kind of the first agency to hear all of the capital requests from all the other agencies, we realized we had this audience of all the major agencies and that we had an opportunity to push them to really be more mindful of how their for capital improvements connected to the needs of the most underserved communities. Because oftentimes there was no direct connection or strategy across the agencies, and we're going to foster a more collaborative approach so that we're really directing these investments in a way that will help communities that have historically not seen that type of coordinated investment benefit them in tangible ways that they can see and appreciate. So we've been honored to work with University of Baltimore on a series of analyses to really look at how can we continue to have investments that are more equitable, and how can we make sure we're getting more input from residents to the planning decision makers at those agencies so that they're just not making decisions in a vacuum, that they're really getting real-time information from all communities, not just those that have more social and political capital. So that was one element. But the element I really want to focus on today outside of the CIP equity analysis, which I believe Binya actually put a link to that analysis in the chat so you can peruse it either during, I prefer after all of our presentations so that you're really listening attentively to the next speakers. But one of the areas that we realized was really important for focus was on how are we reaching out and connecting to communities that have historically experienced divestment. And one of the ways that we thought it could be very helpful to do this is to look back at a project we did in 2013. It was called the East Baltimore Leadership Academy. And for people who are maybe new to Baltimore or not familiar with East Baltimore, there has been quite a transformation in the communities that are most directly bordering Johns Hopkins University. There were many, many, many abandoned homes, but also many families that were uprooted from those communities as revitalization went underway over a period of 15 plus years. So in the wake of that change, even 15 years is pretty fast for a dramatic makeover of a community. It can feel very like a really stunning turn of events. So we thought in partnership with CPHA that it would make sense to talk to community leaders in that footprint so that they can feel better prepared to deal with the land use and development system that in many ways can be bewildering, unclear, and sometimes outright intimidating to interact with. So that was a very geographically focused project, the East Baltimore Leadership Academy. And because of the funding that was supporting it, it was not open to anyone outside of that specific footprint. But that didn't stop community leaders from West Baltimore, South Baltimore, who heard about it to ask, how can I get that information? So we knew that there was an appetite and a thirst to better understand the land use and development system, but not the same institutional support within our agency and city government to kind of transmit it on a continuous basis. So when I came on board, I had the good fortune to learn about the East Baltimore Leadership Academy, hear about some of the positive impacts, but unfortunately, because it was something that was confined to several weeks, some of those community members weren't able to necessarily capitalize on it because it was a brief moment in time. And one of the things that I think is a persistent challenge in Baltimore is that there are constantly content-rich and very important, but unfortunately, episodic interventions into communities. And without something that was going to kind of be a deeper level of engagement, we were concerned that we weren't really equipping community members with information they could really take to the next level. So we decided to launch the Baltimore Planning Academy, which someone could put in the chat, baltimoreplanningacademy.com, so you can also learn more about it, because there is a product that we produce at the Department of Planning in conjunction with the Housing Department. And it's known as the Housing Market Typology. And it divides our city based on housing market strength. So for many people that are well-versed in the concept of the white L and the black butterfly, which is really kind of a visual depiction of the residential segregation that really typifies the norm in Baltimore City, it's fairly consistent with that concept that market strength is largely along the communities that constitute the white L, the spine of the city in the center, Southeast Baltimore, and the like, and then in the area known as the black butterfly, that exhibits the legacy of the redlining map, are some of our weakest housing markets. So as you think of a community that is grappling with the weak housing market, oftentimes, if you were to overlay other indicators of community stress, it would end up just looking like the same communities, where we're looking at issues of crime, or whether we're looking at issues of life expectancy and other hallmarks of just your health. There is a relationship between weak community development outcomes and all the other concerns we have about public health and things that would constitute a vibrant community. So when we launched the Planning Academy, we wanted to know, one, what do community members want to learn? That's why we had 9 pop-ups around the city, because we don't want to presume what the community wants to know. We want to really devise something that's going to be valuable. So we had 9 pop-ups around the city. Then we created an application process that really wanted to get to know what people wanted to know, and also get an insight into what is their commitment to share the information. Because we do have some information hoarders in this city, and we definitely wanted to give that information to people we know would unlock it and unleash it in their communities. And one of the things that I think was really important about using the housing market typology is that for applicants that were coming from our weakest housing markets, that gave you extra points on your application. And that was intentional, because we really want community leaders in our disinvested communities to be really at the front of the line to learn the tools of the trade so that they can revitalize it, but from their perspective. A lot of people think land use and development is happening to them, not with them. So we really wanted to empower the community leaders that had the most at stake. Now, we intended for this to be a cohort model, 30 or so folks at a time, and we were floored. We thought maybe 60 or 70 people would apply. Over 330 people applied at the outset for the Planning Academy. And then we decided to accept 2 cohorts. Then we also decided to open up applications again last summer, and then privilege those who had applied in the prior time. Again, another 250 different people applied. So there is a thirst in this city for people to be on the offense and not always in a reactionary posture to the land use and development system. And I think that through us having an equity committee, having a commitment to really redefining and reimagining what interacting with community means, and making the Baltimore Planning Academy kind of our first kind of deep touch into what that means has been personally gratifying for me, because we know that a community leader in East Baltimore is having some of the same challenges as a community leader in South Baltimore, as a community leader in Northwest Baltimore. And we kind of take for granted in the professional world, we go to conferences pre-COVID where we were networking, we were learning about other things, but community leaders need the same networking opportunities and the same learning opportunities as people that are professionally doing this work. They need it just as much. And so for me, I feel this was an opportunity to explain how our agency worked, but also to explain how the greater city government works as it pertains to planning and land use, because in many ways, I came to this role thinking we would be I would be healing or editing or amending policies that were inequitable. But one of the things I realized very quickly was that it's actually a lack of process and a lack of procedure that makes inequity, I think, even worse, because opaque processes really privilege the insider. You don't need an on-ramp to figure out what's going to happen if you can just get City Hall on the phone, or if someone really responds to your email because they know who you are. So the Planning Academy was kind of breaking down some of those barriers for the participants, but I think it was also challenging us to think about all the different procedures we have in our own agency that could be barriers to making community members welcome and feel that they can access our information. So also the housing market typology has been posted in the chat so folks can look at that map. We're currently in the midst of updating that. So the latest one is the one that's posted, but it's up for a update currently. So I'm excited to share with you two alums of our Planning Academy that are on the front lines at the community level, working to make sure the community's vision and the community's interests aren't just something that's consulted after the fact, but that it's embedded in the front. And I think that's what's super important. A lot of times, people who've gone to planning school, policy school, a lot of times engaging the public is expressed in a very shallow way, if at all. And in many ways, it's like you, the professional, are supposed to whip everything up and then ask the community, is that okay? That is out of order. The community has to be a part of those conversations for their own community destiny in the beginning. So I would like to introduce first Ms. Regina Hammond of Johnston Square. And as I mentioned before, there was an East Baltimore Leadership Academy in 2013. Her community is in East Baltimore, but it was just outside the catchment area for that opportunity because it wasn't as close in proximity to Johns Hopkins. So the work that she's going to describe is really important because some communities do not have the same anchor institutions to leverage. So they have to be creative and they have to be even more organized to really move an agenda. So I want to introduce, and I'm excited for you guys to hear from, Ms. Regina Hammond.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm not sure, I do have a presentation that I can talk through. I don't know if you're gonna put it up and so people can see or not. If not, it's okay, I can talk through it. Just let me know. But it's an honor to be here this morning and just share some information with you about what we had done, and you were right. It's nothing more frustrating than to see an opportunity where you can get some funding to do something in your community, but you can't qualify because you're not located in the right area to get that done. The good news for us was by divine intervention, and I mean that sincerely because I actually sent out a silent prayer that something be done in Johnston Square. And for those of you listening, if you're not familiar with Johnston Square and where we are, if you know the Greenmount Cemetery, we are south of the Greenmount Cemetery. We are actually, the 83 or Guilford Avenue is actually our western border. Eager, or most people know the prison, we are north of the prison, and then our eastern boundary is actually two. We're shaped like a shoe. So Eden Street and Enzer Street are our eastern boundaries. And Johnston Square, I've lived in the community for 36 years. And I watched it deteriorate to lower levels. Instead of it coming up and growing and investment coming in, it declined. I saw a vacant house after vacant house come into the neighborhood. So it was almost like I had to do something, didn't know what to do, just quietly praying when I met an organizer that would basically teach me, lead me, show me how to actually organize a community. And that was our first step. I met an organizer from the Build organization who actually took us by the hand and showed us how to pull the people in our community together so that we could listen to them. We could find out what it was that they wanted in their community. This is not my presentation. This must be, mine is Rebuild Johnston Square. So we ended up having a day where we ended up listening to all of anybody that would come. And we actually had over 100 people show up from Johnston Square at the elementary school that day. And they told us what they wanted for their community because they had not seen any investment come to Johnston Square in a really long time. Recreation was top of the list because we had lots of kids with nothing to do. The recreation center was closed. There was nothing really in our immediate area. So one of our main targets was, we found a park. And I do say found a park because it had been neglected for so long that we ended up having to go down there and we hosted a week-long cleanup. And we cleaned that park from top to bottom during that week and started just doing little cosmetic changes to make it look decent enough for kids to want to at least, or parents to feel comfortable enough to let kids go there. It had a swimming pool. The swimming pool was deteriorated, faded, but it was actually open. Not acceptable, but it was open. So that was where our work begun in the neighborhood. But what we had done in actually taking action towards equity is we started showing people that change could happen. We started planting trees. We started holding weekly cleanups. And then we ended up developing partnerships with our Eastern District Police because that was important, you know, that people, they didn't feel safe. So that was another component of basically taking action to bring some safety and some equity into our communities. We continued on. We started to develop our relationship with the Department of Housing. Anybody that's familiar, yeah, this is ours. So basically, if you could go ahead and click down to about slide 4, well, that's basically our boundaries. That's our core team. But yeah, that basically shows where we are. That's one of our community meetings where we sort of started listening to people, and more people now are become involved. But you can go ahead and click forward because I had already started talking. This was our first cleanup that we hosted. That was the week-long cleanup, and the Compassion Commission sent a busload of kids to help us, and boy, were they welcome. We had teams of people who, and people started taking notice, and it was residents, but in the beginning, we had to show people that change was possible. And so we started doing that. You can click to the next slide. You can click to the next slide. If you can, or who's our clicker? Okay. Oh yeah, there's a police. Yeah, we started having events in Johnston Square Park. For those of you who know, it's the most beautiful view in the city of the downtown skyline. And we started hosting community events there, starting to galvanize and bring the community together and start letting them know, even though we were having fun, having food, we were letting them know that we were going to do some things in Johnston Square. We were going to bring some changes about. So you can move on to the next slide. That's one of the community walks. We got people in the neighborhood. We walked with the police. As we were walking, we had bands walk with us, and we're passing out flyers, letting know we're going to be doing some things in Johnston Square. come to the meetings, tell us what you want. You can go ahead and click to the next slide. So this, if anybody who's familiar with Biddle Street, if you've traveled up Biddle Street maybe a couple of years ago, this is what you would see. Those fences were falling down. This development, which is the one I actually live in, was built in 1984. And those fences had it. And so with the relationship that we built with the Department of Housing, we were able to have a white vinyl replace all that fencing. And you can click to the next slide, which should probably show the so it replaced those old wooden fences. And that came from working with the city, working with the community, sharing some of the things that we wanted to see happen in the neighborhood. Moving on from there, if you want to click to the next, this was the park, Ambrose Kennedy Park. The pool is still Kennedy Park, but we actually did rename the park to Henrietta Lacks Educational Park. One, because most people in the community did not know who Ambrose Kennedy was. But two, we wanted our children and people in our community to be able to relate to somebody who looked like them. So we selected Henrietta Lacks as that person, and we actually ended up having the park renamed. But more importantly, we're very proud of this park because we actually won a $1.5 million grant to renovate it. If you go ahead and click down, it took all of these partners to make this happen. So we locked arms, we pulled together Parks and People and the City of Baltimore, Recs and Parks. We wrote a grant, we won the grant. It was a national grant out of all across the nation. We were one of 4 to win that grant to renovate that park. You can go ahead and click to the next slide. And as you can see, it took a village. We had the City of Baltimore officials, we had state officials, we had the Build organization, we had the 6th branch. All of those people came together when we reopened that park, which became a very welcoming place. And then you can go ahead and click and I'll show you really some of the things that weren't there before. Again, that's just basically our core team and the Build team that were very instrumental in helping us get this done. They taught us, and Mount Sinai Baptist Church is one of our strongest advocates in the Johnston Square community. If you click to the next slide, very proud of this. Before this happened, where you see that splash pad was cracked, broken asphalt with grass growing through it. Nobody wanted to be there. And today, this is what days like today is a very welcoming thing in the park. Who would have thought, but it actually happened and we're very proud of it. If you want to click to the next slide. This is what the basketball court there looked like. And unfortunately, the kids in the community still used it. It was unacceptable. It was just unacceptable. And in the beginning, we did not build the momentum we needed. So if you click to the next slide, this is what we did. It wasn't the greatest. You can see that it still needed to be resurfaced. We got some volunteers just to come in and paint it to make it look a little better for the kids. And they couldn't wait for that paint to dry, just to have a bright color, to have it at least look fresh. That is what we did. We had the painters union come in. They volunteered their labor. We bought the paint and we upgraded it to that. This was before the grant, but then after the grant, you can go ahead and click to the next slide. This is what happened. We actually pulled up all that with that grant and created a whole brand new court. There were no benches before in Johnston, in the park. It wasn't a place to sit. BGE donated the lighting. There were, well, actually, you still see the houses. Those houses on the sides, they are gone. We have demolished those because we are going to extend this park to make it more, get programming in there and do some more educational activities as well. But starting, I mean, just from the ground up, this is some of the steps that we took to build the community. So you could go ahead and move to the next slide. And when I say to you, we have a team, we call it the green team. We have community residents, volunteer residents who actually go into the park twice a week to clean it. But then we partner with Recs and Parks to help keep it clean, keep the grass cut. And the people in the area, you can go there now and you'll see people just sitting. That didn't happen before. Nobody wanted to sit there. There were vacant houses with people walking in and out of them. There wasn't a place you were going to let your children go and play and feel comfortable. But this is what the community was able to do online as far as building some equity in a community that had no investment coming into it. You can go ahead and click to the next slide. And this was actually, it's just beautiful. That's a stormwater feature that was also built into the park as well. And you could go ahead and click to the slide. And this is a past photo. That's what the swimming pool looked like before we won the grant. And that pool was in use. And it just wasn't what we thought our children deserved. So you can go ahead and click to the next slide. On that volunteer day from the Rock Church, we at least did this. This was our grassroots effort before the grant. We put a mural on the pool to hide the rust, you know, and that was sort of our message saying, people with money, investors, city, we are serious. We want to build equity here in Johnston Square. We're willing to do the work. We're willing to do our part, help us. So this is what we did before we got the brand new renovation from the grant. And go to the next slide, and I'll know I'm going to make you laugh, but you would have thought it was Christmas Day, because here we had a park with a swimming pool, and it had no bathrooms. So what do you think happens with no bathrooms with a swimming pool? So when the crane lowered this bathroom into our new park, you would have thought you gave us a bright, shiny toy, because we were just so excited that our children could have a bathroom outside the pool in the summertime when they go out to have fun. So you can go ahead and click. It's just some other scenes, just the park in general. And the next slide, that's just the stormwater feature. And this is where we actually dedicated the park and renamed the park portion to Henrietta Lacks, because we really do feel it's important. We see a movement now where these statues in most of our institutions, people don't know who they are, and if they do, they weren't, you know, really helping us. So this is something, and this is a person who has helped the world. And we thought it was fitting that we named this new renovation after Henrietta Lacks. So moving on, you can move on to the next slide. And this slide just basically shows it. I don't know if you can really see it, but those houses I showed you, I just had to snap a picture of this. That's when we tore down, or we had demolished, working with state and city officials. We had all of those vacant houses demolished in order to make room to actually expand the park, which will be a phase 2, which we're still working on. So you can move on to the next part. And so here's one of the pieces of our vision, our 2020 vision plan, which we just had accepted by the Department of Planning. One of our partners in building this equity is St. Francis Academy. They have an excellent football team. They have no field. So one of the things that they want to do, you can click back to that, the field picture, is they want to, forward. Yeah, this is a projection of what the field would look like, but it's going to be a combination playing field and community green space. So the community will not be locked out of this. We do understand that we have to protect the field, but it will be a combination playing field and community space for the neighborhood. And that's part of we're raising money to do this project as well. So you can click over to the next slide. Quality of life is a big issue here. Building equity also means this: having some art, some beauty, some things that make you smile when you walk or drive down the street. We're proud of this mural we just had installed at Biddle and Wilcox Street through a grant from Baltimore Promotion in Arts. Again, the community came together and supported this project, and we got it done. And that was our goal, to help people, you know, give them some hope. Let them know, hey, we can do this as a community. We can build equity here in our community. You click to the next slide. One of the other things we did is we have so many vacant lots. This lot is actually behind my house. And it was a chore, because it is city property. It was a chore to keep it cut. So we basically adopted it. And what we ended up doing, if you click to the next slide, we went from that to the very next slide. The city helped us. They brought in some trash cans, some picnic tables. They installed the solar lighting. We had to gate it, needless to say. We are in the city. You do have challenges, but we've had residents in the neighborhood host parties and weddings, places they can enjoy right here. And some people's family members say, I cannot believe I'm in the city. But yes, you are in the city. So you can go ahead and click. Also, another scene from that. And it is evolving from this scene to what we have now. We planted a big rose bush in the center. If you want to click to the next slide. That's our latest improvement, just to have a pretty centerpiece. Like all things, we had some challenges with the previous slide with, you know, destruction. It happens because this space opens up to people's backyards. We can't control who enters that space. Everybody does it, you know, it is what it is. So we made some adjustments, so it's still pretty. We just had to do things a little differently. You can move on to the next slide. Neighbors take interest. This is one of our oldest members in our community. As you see, she does have a green thumb. You can move to the next slide. This was another dumping ground. You could walk through here anytime. This is on Biddle Street, the 900 block of Biddle Street. You could find a tire, a couch, a mattress. So again, we adopted this lot as well. Slowly but surely, we improved it. If you want to click, it'll show you how it sort of evolved. The city put the fence up for us so we could start to improve it. And then you can click to the next slide. We put our little adopt a lot sign up, and we still gradually do work on it. You could go ahead. And all of these things serve the community in that, wow, I remember when I walked past there and there was a mattress, or there was a couch, or there were some old tires thrown up there. But yeah, things can change. We as a community can do things. This is Mirror Street. That space, I wrote another little grant just to build the fencing around it, a Love Your Block grant. We, 6th grade, helped us put up the fence, got the community together, because what would happen is people would put all their trash right there until trash was picked up. And sometimes that trash would sit for a week. And the few folks that lived on Mirror Street, it was like the smell is horrendous. Why are people bringing their trash and putting it on our block? So we ended up fencing it off. And if you want to click to the next slide, you can see we got another grant from the BEEP organization. We put a sign up, and you want to click to the next slide. This is that dumping ground. And a resident did this. One of the residents of Mirror Street created this garden in that space that we ended up just fencing in just to stop the dumping. And you want to click to the next slide. And these aren't paid employees. These are community volunteers creating beauty on their blocks. If you just give them a little help, in finding a couple of funds, a $5,000 grant here, you know, a few bucks there. That's what we can do in our communities. You click to the next slide. We wanted people to know you're in Johnston Square, because when we've got it all done, we want you to know where you are. You're in Johnston Square. So we ended up, the Art with a Heart helped us with this little mosaic sign. And again, if you want to click to the next slide, we have another volunteer in the neighborhood who loves native flowers. So she's taken that over and planted some native flowers that don't take a lot of maintenance and care. Again, just to keep it beautiful. And you want to click to the next slide. This is Huffman Street. This was a dumping ground, a vacant lot. We have another, well, she's not a resident. She actually adopted the lot because she wanted to conduct some experiments about lead in soil. But since she has planted a sunflower garden, and it's blooming and it's beautiful. So you can go ahead and click to the next slide. In building equity, you see these few names: Rebuild Johnston Square, Rebuild Metro, Build, Barco, Parks and People, St. Francis. This is how we've gone about to build equity. We formed Johnston Square Partners. And with that partnership, if you want to click to the next slide, this is the 1200 block of Homewood Avenue, which was all vacant except for about 2 houses. Because of that partnership, those houses have now been rehabbed and are fully occupied. You want to click to the next slide. Oh, that's the same slide. So go ahead to the next slide. And so here's where we actually broke ground again, building equity in our community. 700 East Chase. It's part of our vision plan. A 60-unit apartment building is actually almost completed now. They're expected to be done either the end of this year, beginning of next year. Go ahead, click to the next slide. Again, this in the background, you see the 600 block of Biddle Street, nothing but vacants. But our goal is also to renovate those houses as well. So that's part of our 2020 vision plan that's been accepted as well. You can go ahead and click to the next slide. And that's actually what we want the 700 block of Chase Street, when it's all said and done. That's the beginning of the next 10 years of all the great things we want to do here in Johnston Square. Go ahead and click to the next slide. Not to mention this, it's so important to have not only businesses, but employment opportunities in the community. Charm City Mead Works, who they manufacture their own mead, as well as they've employed people from the community. The owner of Charm City Meat Works is an excellent partner to the community, which is important. So finally, the last slide, just want to say that we're very proud of the fact that we did come together as a partnership, and we did get our 2020 vision plan in building equity in Johnston Square, and that's where we're headed. So just wanted to share that with you. For those on the call that are in the communities and want to make some changes, it is possible. Got organized first, pull together, partner with your state, local, and officials, as well as private sector, and great things can happen. Thank you. I'm done.
Professor Sanders, can I say something really quick?
Oh, please do.
One of the things that there are a few questions I may have missed. I've been trying to answer them in the chat, so feel free, panelists, if there are some answers you want to provide. But for all of the attendees, I want to say that, one, I had to wipe away a few tears too, Regina, because sometimes when you see it all, the journey in one presentation, it is incredibly inspiring. And probably when you look back, you go, you did all that? Yes, you did all that with the community. But one of the volunteers. But one of the things that I feel that Regina kept mentioning, but I want to make sure people heard, is that a lot of times when we talk with communities, they're waiting for a grant, action from the city, or an institution nearby to do something, but Regina didn't wait. One of the things that we tell people in the Planning Academy is that the money comes to busy people. So when you start doing things, even though they might not have been exactly what you wanted, like you said, hey, I can at least make this basketball court look better than it looks. It might not look professional grade, but it still shows activity to spruce it up a bit. So just a series of things of, I'm gonna do what I can for now to show that we are busy, we care. And when people see that you're busy and you care, then they will funnel more resources to you. But a lot of times people are wanting to go sometimes from nothing to her ending, but if people don't see that there's more than one person who cares, that there's more than one person that really is committed, it's really hard to distinguish, particularly looking at a grant opportunity or philanthropy. They're looking for something that they hope will be sustainably embraced by more than one person's heart dream. They want to know that it's more than a Miss Regina that cares. They want to know that there's, that there are others. So by being busy, it laid the foundation for all these other partnerships to flourish because they weren't waiting for something to happen to start moving. They started moving and then stuff starts happening. And I think a lot of people think it's the other way around, but it's really what she just outlined. So I just wanted to lift that up. Thank you for that. I want to give an opportunity for Dr. Doris Terrell of Broadway East to share her presentation as well, because I want to make sure, I know we only have about 3 more minutes, so I want to make sure she gets her presentation in, and we'll continue to answer questions in real time in the chat feature. Professor Sanders, is there anything you'd like to say beforehand?
I just didn't know if you were able to answer the question about how the housing market has changed since Johnston Square. And then to Ms. Regina, what was the time frame of all of these projects? When did you start?
We actually have been at this for 7 years now.
Okay. Thank you. And then to Stephanie, were you able to answer the question about how the housing market has changed since Johnston Square started?
Well, as you can see, I don't have all the data figures with me.
Okay.
Getting the housing market typology right now, but by evidence of the fact that there are literally, housing coming online that was not coming online in the previous 10 years, that's a testament to the momentum that Ms. Regina and her team, have started. But we do have some planners that are also participating in the chat feature, so they're giving some answers as well.
Okay, great.
So I wanted to direct people to that. I know there were some questions about economic vitality, particularly around the Greenmount corridor and specifically around the Yellow Bowl. So Rudy Lawal and our comprehensive planning team provided an answer in there.
Oh, good.
Say that it's really important when you don't have necessarily a huge anchor like a hospital or university. Partnership is where it's at, and Ms. Regina Hammond is a master at building partnerships, and they're very diverse. A meadery, I don't know if Ms. Regina has ever drank mead in her life, but I didn't stop her from partnering with a nice man who owns a mead company. So it's things like that where I think people have to be open and flexible. A church, mead works, we can all make it happen together.
Yeah.
I just want to commend her for that, because I think a lot of times people are sometimes thinking if it's not the most obvious partner, they wouldn't maybe pursue it. And she's never been that type. So I just want to salute that.
Oh, awesome. Okay, well, I think we're ready for the third presentation. Dr. Terrell?
Yeah. Hi, I'm at somewhat of a disadvantage, so I apologize for my technical difficulties this morning and this afternoon since it's almost 12 o'clock. Great presentation from Regina, my community partner, which I appreciate a lot, just having the time to work with her. I would like to talk about what the equity planning has done for the Broadway East community. We're a community without money, so being in the Black Butterfly is different, quite different when you have been overlooked for the past 30 years. So we owe a lot to the planning department and the fact that we were able to participate in the academy. The academy created for us the ability to establish new relationships, to better understand what it takes to move a community forward. We are a struggling community. 46% of the community is unemployed. We talk about just the environmental issues. Maybe we've had 2 trees planted in the last 5 years. So you can see we've been severely overlooked and not thought to be worthy of moving forward. So it's quite a challenge to enter an arena that sometimes you have not been well versed on. and being at the table to better understand how you can elevate the people who live here. I have absolutely no skills as a developer. That's not in my toolkit. I understand people. I understand what you can do for a community if you're committed enough to believe that they're worthy. The people here have not had equal opportunity as we look at them today. They have been left behind, not considered as an area ready for revitalization. So I think the housing market in terms of rental is at 46% and home ownership is at 12%. If we go to look at Baltimore neighborhood alliances data, they do not look at Broadway East as a separate area. So when we go to use their stats, we usually have to use the Greenmount East stats to figure out what we're doing. So that's another kind of oversight that people in the Black Butterfly are feeling. To get past that, we have to be willing to say, we can make this change. I learned that in the academy. Our boundary lines are from Broadway to Milton Avenue, from north to Biddle. If you travel this way, you will see it looks like a third world country. It's been abandoned. When we talk about vacancies, we have maximum vacancy. We have 900 lots alone that have been abandoned. So we're talking about how do you create that plan? Because for me, I said, well, what are we going to do? How can we make this change happen? Who's going to be at the table to assist us? Well, I found that within the Department of Planning. We created relationships. That academy allowed us to come to the table with, I can make friends here, I can receive directions here, and we can create something that will allow these residents to survive. What do we mean by survival? We mean greening, home ownership, employment, education. All of those things are important. So within that academy, we learned what some of the stumbling blocks were. We would better understand what zoning was about. We could see what the past had been, and we were able to create the future where we want to go. We have absolutely no money as a community, but we have relationships and we have commitments to change. I submitted, I think, and I think there were 3 visual presentations that is a direct result of our ability to talk with people and bond with them so that we can look at what change should look like. We created a greening plan, and that greening plan consisted of what we wanted to do with the lots that we have. We thought about trees, what a tree canopy would be. We thought about taking a main street like Wolf Street and just creating a green canopy for the Wolf Street. We did that. But again, it all happened because we had that relationship with the planning department. Without that Baltimore City Planning Department, we would have been able to do nothing. We created what we call the last mile park. It bridges the gap between the EBDI community and a forgotten community, which is Broadway East. We have been long overlooked, but we are now at the table, but we give that credit to planning. Planning has allowed us a seat at the table of equality. I am not able to see if the slides for the greening plan are available. I do know that I believe I submitted them.
They are up.
Share.
Yeah, we're looking at it. Yes, we're looking at it on the small and medium neighborhood places.
Yes,
the prototypes.
yes. And I guess what I want the listening audience to understand, the reason we got to this point is because we had friends within the planning department with expertise that allowed us to be able to shape this instrument, put it in book form, and say, this is where we're going. Prior to that, we had nothing. So we now see that we can shape this community. We can bring to the table equality for people. This is a predominantly 90% African American community. So I would say to anyone who's listening, you can do this. You can make change. Come to the table. We did this within a 12-month span of time, only because we had relationships. Relationships directly connected to planning. And people that the planning department shared out as resources. So when we talk about what the city is doing, their ability to raise the flag, their ability to bring inclusion to the table, I think what you need to give major credit to is the fact that you have planners who are in your corner. Of course, you as a resident of the community must be willing to do the work, but you do have the resources if you reach out. We have partners like Sixth Branch. Sixth Branch has been around to come behind you and help you with the project. If you're going to have a cleanup, you call Sixth Branch. We have landscape architects that came to the table and said, we are here, we will help you. I'm not a landscaping person. I have zero skills in that area, but the planning department made available to us those people who had the skills. When we go back to talk about funding, the planning department made sure we understand which grants were available that we could apply for. Because as a community, we don't have that we don't have the Catalyst grant here. We don't have it yet. We will apply, but we don't have that funding yet. We have a garden that I would give Kimberly Knox major kudos for making sure that Duncan Street Garden was at the forefront of all that was going on, and making sure we got funding for the Duncan Street Garden, making sure that the state is at the table for the Duncan Street Garden, but it would not be possible if it wasn't for relationships, which is critical if you're going to elevate your community. The planning department is your friend. I think I have another one there that shows maybe the outcome of that last mile park as we talk about bridging the lighting opportunities and bridging a community that frequently has not been visited by others, but we can open the door for visitation if we can just change things like lighting. And that's lighting under the bridge, lighting that keeps other people from coming in because they fear the crime. Our crime stats are like at 69%. So we need those changes.
I think I have it up right now, the last mile steering committee PowerPoint.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the direct result of working together to change just simply lighting, talking about murals for the community, a connection between another community that is up and thriving. So that alone will give us an opportunity to be part of a major planning effort. We are not exclusionary anymore. We're not practicing that. Baltimore City is not practicing that. The planning department has made sure that people have the knowledge to be able to build within their communities. They don't have to go out and find the resources. It's here. You give hugs to your planning department. I think the other, Should I give you the Wolf Street planning? We did get funding for that from Bloomberg.
Yes, I have that up, the 5 blocks.
Yes, and that
Yep.
5 blocks also is about an environmental change, changing the environment, clean, green, and safe. Usually where there's greenery, people think different. Violence is reduced just by entering different thoughts. Fresh air. You know, sometimes we people don't like trees because, you know, we say it's going to destroy the property. I'm going to have to clean up the leaves. But when we think about the environment and what you need in the actual exchange of oxygen that is necessary for your survival, trees need to be here. All communities should have a tree canopy. There are other communities here that have tree canopies. This community had none. There is the housing market. When we talked about people's income, basic income is at about $28,000 a year. That needs to be elevated. We need to change that. And again, we've learned how to do that. And we've learned how to think about having housing that would allow these residents to purchase as opposed to rent. There's one more. I'm just going to talk about a simple subject when we talk about equality, because our people need to be able to either walk to work or have adequate transportation. So the stats here said that 56% of the people have no vehicles. So working through the planning department and better understanding transportation and the need to cooperate with transportation, we have lots of information on how to make sure these thoroughfares provide the transportation that's needed in this particular black butterfly, so people can have economic dignity on the table. So again, I give major kudos to the planning department and what they have allowed this community to understand and the importance of what it means in equity planning. I thank you, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your presentation. Before we jump into questions for Dr. Terrell, there were a few that I saw in the chat that might not have been answered. So I want to field those out and then we'll open up to a larger conversation. One question is, how do we keep community associations strong over time? And I'm going to direct this to Dr. Terrell or Ms. Hammond. What are your thoughts? How to keep community associations strong over time?
Well, I don't know if Hammond is going to answer, but I will answer. It's about making sure you keep the interest up. We give them positives, such as they need to see change. They need to understand that they are part of the process. Inclusion is the key. If they don't feel included, you're not respectful of their ideas, and they believe that you're just there to bring what you want, it is not going to work. People need to feel needed, and they need to know that they're respected.
Thank you. Any additional thoughts, Ms. Hammond?
So would you repeat that question?
Oh, no problem. How do we keep community associations strong over time?
Definitely. Well, one, I think I attribute a lot of our success to the fact that, one, we don't take a break from our community meetings. They know we're going to be there the second Monday of every month so that we can hear them. We let them know, like Mr. Terrell said, they got to be involved. They got to see their suggestions in motion. So yeah, I think that's important, because when they start seeing change, they start to buy in more and more. And that's what we've noticed. Our attendance has grown because of it. You know, they get curious. They see somebody running around the neighborhood planting flowers here, there, and everywhere. What's going on? They see construction on Green Mountain, Chase Street. Things are happening here. So I think those are all key to keeping the community strong.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question directed at both of you. Has there been much vandalism at the park, or have you had problems with drug dealers trying to take over the park and open space?
For us, we've had a little we've had a bench destroyed. Well, not destroyed, it's sort of sideways now, let's say. But for the most part, you can walk. And I don't know what goes on at night down there, but I know during the day, in the evening hours, you can walk and you'll see groups of people sitting around, and they may have their little beverages there. And we'll make conversation. We'll say, now, we're counting on you to look out for the park and help keep it clean. We're involving them. This is their park. And I think that has helped. It also helps the fact that they know that Green Team is going to be there twice a week, cleaning it up. So they know we're not just doing this and leaving it. We're going to keep it clean, and we need your help to keep it clean. But yeah, we all have those challenges, and we're constantly thinking of new creative ways to involve people to get them on our side as far as keeping things safe and clean. And it works sometimes.
Thank you. The next question I think is going to be directed for Stephanie Smith. Someone commented on the funding for approved community plans. Could you speak to if there are specific funding set aside for approved community plans?
The short answer is no. I'll just be completely transparent. So we changed kind of our labeling from adopting a community plan to accepting, because we felt that though that might seem like a minor word change, it more adequately reflects the system. The adoption of a plan sometimes suggested to someone that because Planning Commission adopted it, that means it's automatically going to be funded by the executive, right? But that's not always going to happen for a host of reasons. Right now, with COVID-19 and the stress that's, that we have on our revenues, I think a lot of things that people even pledged to do in the past may be on a different timeline, right? But the reason it's incredibly important for the public and is really important to hear from Ms. Regina Hammond and Dr. Doris today is that when the government is looking at all these plans, and they're looking at what's the energy behind it. Because some of these plans in the past were being billed as community plans, but they didn't have a lot of engagement of the community. So we created a community plan policy 2 years ago that requires documented stages of engagement with a footprint. So if, for example, let's say there are 2 or 3 recognized community associations on a footprint, and they have overlapping boundaries. One of those community groups could not just commission a community plan and petition it for acceptance before Planning Commission if they have not consulted with the other folks that also have overlapping boundaries, or they haven't, had public meetings. The reason why all this is important is when you can build the case that the depth of the community interest and involvement in the plan is more robust, it makes it a lot easier for our community planners as they're working with our sister agencies that are the implementing agencies like Parks and Recs, like DPW, like DOT. It gives us that leverage to help them prioritize fulfilling those elements of a plan, because the plan is not the Stephanie Smith plan for a community that I never talked to. It's an actual plan from a community. So that's one of the changes we made to have more equitable outcomes with community plans, is to literally have some oversight. So before you're even able to go on the journey of establishing a community plan, you must first consult with the community planner for your area of the city. So that way, that person who knows all the other impacted groups, knows the other community groups, knows the other anchors in the footprint, they can help guide that conversation so that it's not just one person claiming they're speaking on behalf of everybody else. Now, I know, for example, with the communities that these leaders are in, there aren't a million overlapping community groups, but we do have parts of the city where 3 and 4 groups are on top of each other, and it wouldn't be proper. And I think, for one, to say they're speaking for all. So with that being said, moving in this way, I think will help us to be more strategic in getting the funding and the support that we need internal to city government. But as we know, none of these projects are necessarily fully funded with just city dollars. It's important to note that there are philanthropic dollars, state dollars that can come to bear. But in many instances, and I'm sure they can both attest to this, grants are often wondering, and also capital dollar requests are also wondering what other money you're leveraging. So it really is about building kind of like a lasagna of different funding sources to leverage. And it's more compelling when you have a plan, and it's more compelling when you can say that plan really has people behind it, not just one person's idea behind it. So I think that with this planning process change, it will facilitate an opportunity for community groups to get funding in a way that's more deliberate.
I want to build on what you're talking about with the funding. And this question is directed towards Ms. Hammond and Dr. Minor Terrell. Someone wants to know a little bit more details about the budgets required for the various planning products and processes. And also, what was the mix of public and private funds to get the vision plans completed?
I'm sorry, did you say public and private funds to get the plans completed? Is that correct?
Yeah, someone wants to know about the high quality planning documents that you were able to create. Was that
those were grants, mostly grants. We did not get private funding other than some grants. If you're talking about the Broadway East screen print, those are grant funding. We did not get anything from private companies or nonprofits, private nonprofits. So that's all grant money that you see on the table for that product.
And what about for Johnston Square?
Not that I cannot give specifics, but I will say that in all of the projects that we've done, because Rebuild Metro is part of the partnership and they mostly handled most of the funding. I do know that I've been a part of a number of conversations with groups of private foundations, showing them our work. I have gone down to housing in, I believe it's Landham or Landover, and spoken there and promoted what we're trying to do. So our funding is private and public and state, and we give, I lead tours in the community just so people can see the work that we're doing and how sincere we are about getting this work done. So the percentages I couldn't tell you, but it's a lot of work, but well worth it.
Well worth it. Thank you. Are there any other questions that we might have missed?
I'm happy to take over, Professor Sanders. I know you have to run. I don't want you to feel tethered because I know you're.
Thank you.
But thank you so much.
Thank
you so much, Tonya. Stephanie, if you want to take over as moderator.
I'm happy to jump in.
The question was good about how did people stay engaged just during social distancing. If you want to.
That was the one I was going to ask. Yeah, the community leaders, people are interested in how are you keeping up the connection with COVID-19 and the social distancing expectations.
Speaking for the Broadway East community, our major forum for communication tends to be the robocall that works for us. So we will send out a wellness message. We will follow that with a checkup call for people. We will also send out information related to where free services are available, or send out information as to what's the next step based on what's happening with the COVID. We would sometimes receive a lot of questions around healthcare, and that comes from the community. So we will feed that question back out to one of the health facilities to let them know that people have questions. But the communication during the COVID is via robocalls for us. And that's because our population also is a senior population, or the juvenile population does not have direct access to the technology that's needed to do the virtual that would be needed for this community, which is another example of denial within the community. So we push to have equity on the table when it comes to the technology that's needed for our children.
For Johnston Square, we sort of used a number of methods to communicate. We still are doing our monthly meetings. They're just virtual now. And people, those who are, and we do have a senior population as well. The good news is we also have what you would call, it's a version of the block captain, but I like to refer to them as block leaders. And usually the block leaders are on our monthly calls, and they serve to communicate to their blocks and reaching out. They know where the seniors are. So a lot of communication comes through the leaders to get back to us and getting help back to them, because we are hosting a number of food delivery type programs now, and where the free food is for those who might need it. We are working on a newsletter program, again, for people who aren't online, but we are also in the process of working on the connectivity, because if nothing else, we learned from COVID that we have to fix that for the next pandemic. So that's something that's definitely on the table, exploring, offering the classes, offering the PCs, offering the internet connections. So that's coming down. But in the meantime, the word of mouth with the block captains and the virtual meetings have been sort of keeping us connected. Not to mention, I send out individual text messages and emails because some people who may not have a PC, they do know how to text message, and they're seniors too. So that works as well.
Thank you for that, because they're reiterating that. I think some people are struggling with their community participation with COVID, so they wanted to get some ideas. They wanted to get some ideas. So I think those are really good ones. I know that some community associations, if they are situated near kind of a public garden or some type of green space, some of them have done very strict social distancing meetings where, you know, people are appropriate levels apart. That might be something that makes sense for people where there's just a huge technology gap altogether, and they, you know, and if you only have a small group, that is also an alternative, of course, properly covered face masks and distance. I wanted to see if I missed any other questions that Professor Sanders was sharing. Hold on one second. I know we only have about 6 minutes left. I would love to hear more about your engagement of young people, because both of you spoke to opportunities, whether it's with cleanup, greening efforts, because one of the things that sometimes we don't talk about related to equity, and we talked about it a bit even in Planning Academy, is that transgenerational equity are replacing undue burdens on future generations. Like, you know, everything that we do now, there's a 15-year-old that's going to be paying taxes on it very shortly, right? And some of the things that we're talking about that we know are going to be here for many, you know, decades into the future. How do you work with young people to get them excited about their community and participating? Either one of you or both.
I think asking young people to participate in a leadership role and giving them an opportunity to communicate with their population in terms of their age bracket, what they have in common, and coming together with their group so that their group can speak out at community meetings about what they want. They have plans. You have to allow them to participate and share that plan so that they're not feeling like they have to go off and do it alone. That's been important to make sure that they at community meetings, that they are there, they participate, and they understand that they can put their issues on the table.
For us at Johnston Square, we have a strong partnership. We only have 2 schools in Johnston Square. We have St. Francis Academy and we have Johnston Square Elementary. And right now, our focus really, we have a strong partnership with the elementary school, trying to at least bring the school up to speed, working with the principal and administrators on how the community can engage. So basically, we get the communications from the students, through the parents, to the teachers, and to us. And we actually do have a monthly meeting at the school, seeing how we can address those issues. I am actually speaking with the school tomorrow at their PTA meeting about engagement, but mainly working through the parents and the teachers is how we engage the students, because I'm looking to identify the next Johnston Square leaders. So they're going to come through St. Francis and Johnston Square Elementary.
That's so important what you just described, because I know there was a question earlier about how do you just even keep your community association vibrant or, engaged, basically, not even before COVID, let alone post-COVID. And you really are hitting on something that's really important. I know every neighborhood doesn't have a school in it, but you do have a couple of schools. And what people don't realize is that there are some people that, due to maybe just the life pressures, the season of life they're in, joining a community group might not be, where they are, because they're still trying to raise their kids and get their life together. But organizing messaging through schools is where we often encourage community groups. Like, you might not get those people going to your meetings, but they might have a lot to give, and they might show up for a cleanup, or they might show up for a project, even if they're not going to come to stuff, all the time. So thank you for lifting up the importance of the school and the parents and the people who care about the kids being a good resource, even if they can't always be formal members of the community group. That's super important. Another question that was lifted up, I just want to make sure I'm not missing it. Hold on. Oh yeah, so there was a question about grant resources. So back to the community planner. The community planner has a target geography, East Baltimore, Northeast, what have you. So they are often the primary resource for community associations to figure out what type of funding is available. Is it governmental funding available? Is there sometimes geographic-based funding? So let's say you're living in a part of the city that gets dedicated community development funds based on slots revenue or based on, casino revenue. Those pockets of funding are geographically confined. But if you do live in those relevant areas, the community planner would be able to inform you, this is when the application period for that, type of grant opportunity is available, and give you that information. But I wouldn't say that we have an exhaustive list of this information, but as we know it, we push it out in our monthly newsletter, The Compass, or directly to communities, groups that are in the geographic footprint where it's applicable. Because some things are citywide and some things are kind of based on where you are in the city. But I would always say your community planner is like your first stop to kind of figure out what's happening. I want to also lift up, because I know a lot of people go, okay, you're doing this planning academy for wonderful community leaders like Ms. Regina and Dr. Doris, right? We also realize that there's a need for our elected leaders to even be better informed so that they can more strategically help the Ms. Reginas and the Dr. Dorises. So we did a pilot shrunken down version of the Planning Academy for elected leaders and their staff members. And now that we know there's going to be a transition with our council leadership and what have you, we are preparing to do something similar at the end of the year to help bring them and their staff members up to speed on the land use system. Because in some instances, elected leaders are sometimes writing letters of support that are not applicable to what's at hand. We want to make sure that they're the best help to their residents. So we feel an obligation not only to share this information with leaders, community leaders, but also with our elected leaders as well. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. It looks like it's 12:30, so I have to shut it down, but I do want to lift up that all of the different links that were in the chat, they will be compiled and they will be sent out to the registrants so that you can review it. We are so thankful that people were so involved and really asked so many terrific questions. And I just want to tell you, thank you, Regina Hammond. Thank you, Dr. Doris Terrell, because you do this for free. I do my job, you do this for free. And I think that people come away from this session inspired to act, and I'm honored to share this space with you and to share a bit of your journey.
You're welcome.
Well, hi, I guess our closing note would be that we give kudos to the planning department. We raise them up because they have allowed us to do the work. Our planner is Marcella Wallace. She is fantastic.
Go planners, woo!
Yes,
Thank
man.
everybody. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was amazing. Hopefully we'll see
Thank you.
future data week sessions. It's all going on. Next one's at 1 o'clock in case anybody's interested.